we will begin. And my name is Aileen Leonard-Deeper. I'm the Executive Director at the Coalition of Irish Immigration Centers. Thank you to everyone who has come back to join us again for our sixth session of Moving to Ireland seminar series, which is for those people contemplating move to Ireland. We're really thrilled tonight to have with us Richard King from CrossCare and Sarah Owen from CrossCare's Irish Diaspora Support Project. Both are long-term partners with the coalition and with our membership. Emily Ashenhurst is here from the Irish Diaspora Center, and we've all worked for a long time with Richard and Sarah in supporting people, particularly in the area of returning home to Ireland to live. We can go to the next one, Sarah. Very briefly, I just want to introduce the Coalition of Irish Immigration Centers. If this is your first time joining us, the Coalition is the national organization for Irish immigration centers across the U.S. We currently have 10 active members who provide an array of services to the Irish community in their region. The Coalition itself advances its members through collaboration and education to benefit the global Irish in the United States. And we do this in a couple of ways. We collaborate not only with our membership to share information and best practice and provide a national perspective of the diaspora in the US, but we do so also with the larger Global Irish Network, which we regularly cultivate ties and strengthen ties with. We provide impactful learning opportunities for our membership and for the greater diaspora in instances like this through the Moving to Ireland series. And finally, we share and distribute current, accurate, and reliable information on topics pertinent to the Irish community, particularly in the areas of immigration. I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Emily, who's going to talk a little bit about the IDC.
Thanks, Aileen. I am thrilled to say thank you to all of you joining us this evening. Thank you to Richard and to Sarah, who are joining us very late by Irish standards. We're keeping them up way past bedtime. I am Emily Ashenhurst. I am the Executive Director for the Irish Diaspora Center out of Philadelphia, and I am very proud to partner with Aileen at the Coalition and all of our members across the country. Much like those members, the Irish Diaspora Center is a direct service provider to the Irish community located within our geographic area. Our mission is to strengthen our heritage by providing the Irish diaspora in the Philadelphia area with consular, immigration, and community services. We break those services down into 3 areas under advocacy, community, and discovery. Our programs range from immigration to senior services, youth programs, and mental health programs. So that's about the Irish Diaspora Center. I'd like to chat for a second about some housekeeping items. If you have questions this evening, please make sure to post them in the Q&A section, not the chat section. Aileen and I will be moderating those questions, and we'll be sure to come back at the end of the presentations and ask Richard and Sarah to work through some of the questions that we have, though we cannot get into specifics tonight. We are looking at kind of the broader picture of immigration into Ireland. If you have specifics, we can connect you to CrossCare, and I'm sure that they can help you with some of the more in-depth questions that you may have. Aileen, I'm going to kick it back to you.
I think you covered it all, Emily. I'm just going to hand it right over to our speakers and get into it. I know that people are excited to do this. The one thing I would say is we may place a couple of links. You're not going to use the chat, but we may put a couple of links in there for you to grab as the presentation goes on. So Sarah, Richard, thank you so much. Handing off to you.
Thanks very much, Aileen and Emily. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, it is slightly past our bedtime, so do bear with us as we go through. But it's a pleasure to be partnering with the Coalition and indeed the Irish Diaspora Centre. As Aileen has said, we're long-term partners, and we feel this is going to be an excellent opportunity to discuss some of the points around moving to Ireland as a US citizen, and hopefully we can guide you through your journey and tell you what you need to know. So starting with a little bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about this evening. So the first thing is the Irish immigration system, a few key factors and questions to consider. Then we'll move on to part 2, which will be about moving to Ireland as a US citizen who has a link to an Irish citizen. So either a de facto partner, a spouse, or a child dependent. Then we'll move on to moving to Ireland as a US citizen with no Irish citizen family and looking at options that are available. We'll do a little recap then, and we'll go straight into the Q&A. As Aileen and Emily have both said, please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll try and answer as many as we can towards the end of the seminar. I should say the slides are going to be circulated with you, and there are hyperlinks throughout the slides, so we would encourage you to take a look at those, and also, of course, have a look at the Irish Diaspora Support Project website, which is diasporasupport.ie. So really, to start with, for all of you, there's obviously a link to Ireland somewhere, and I suppose something to think about is your entitlement to Irish citizenship. Do you have an entitlement to Irish citizenship by descent? Now, there is a lot of information out there, so sometimes people can get a little bit confused, but hopefully the slide will help you to be very clear on whether that entitlement is something that you can look into or not. So if you were born in Ireland before January 2005, you're automatically an Irish citizen. If you were born in Ireland after the 31st of December 2004, and your parent was an Irish citizen or a UK citizen, you have an automatic entitlement to Irish citizenship. If you were born to a non-Irish citizen, it depends on your parents' reckonable residence at that point. And then finally, if you're born outside of Ireland to an Irish citizen who was born in Ireland, you're automatically an Irish citizen, and all you have to do is apply for your Irish passport. If, however, you were born to an Irish citizen who was also born outside of Ireland, you're looking to go through the foreign birth registration process, and the Coalition actually had a webinar on this earlier this week, so there's plenty of resources there that you can check out on their website. And the same thing if you have an Irish grandparent who was born in Ireland, you're looking to go through the foreign birth registration process. There's a link there to applying for Irish passports and how you go about doing that. And then on our website, we have a Returning to Ireland section that has plenty of information that will help guide you through if none of those apply. And I'll be going through some of the options available to you there. There's also a very useful page on the citizens' information that goes through Irish citizenship through birth or descent that we'd suggest you have a look at. So to give you an idea of how the Irish immigration system works in Ireland, Immigration Service Delivery, ISD, is part of the Irish Department of Justice, and they have overall responsibility for immigration permissions in Ireland. So for a non-Irish citizen, the process would be applying for a visa or pre-clearance if applicable. Now, US citizens don't have to do that unless they're going through a particular channel, say de facto partner, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more. Then traveling to Ireland and going through border control at the airport, registering for residence permission, again, if applicable, and then after 5 years of reckonable residency in Ireland, being able to apply for citizenship. That might be a little bit less if you're married to an Irish citizen, but we're not going to get into that this evening. So if you do have questions about that, please just email us and we'll have contact details at the end of the slides. So a few key questions to consider. Do you think you have a pathway to Irish citizenship? Which is the first one. The second is, if you don't, do you have a family member who is an Irish citizen? In which case, the next section is going to really apply to you. Are you planning on coming to Ireland for a short period or for a longer term stay? And what are your intentional plans on moving to Ireland? Do you want to work? Do you want to study? Do you want to bring family? Do you want to retire? And that's what we're covering this evening. So again, just to remind you, this presentation is directed specifically at American citizens, so US passport holders, who don't currently have to apply for a visa in order to travel to the Republic of Ireland, but also don't hold citizenship of an EU country, Switzerland or the UK. So moving on, if you're a US citizen who has an Irish citizen family member, there are a couple of options that might be worth considering for you. So the first would be if you are a de facto partner of an Irish citizen. So that's someone who you're in a partnership with, you're not married, but you've been living together for at least 2 years. The next would be if you are married to an Irish citizen, so you are the spouse of an Irish citizen. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about the child dependent of an Irish citizen. Now, a child dependent is someone who is under the age of 18 or is aged 18 to 23 and financially dependent and also in full-time education. There are options for other family members, but they're not quite as clear-cut. So if you fall in that category, please again, just contact us and we can go through your options because we'll need to understand your circumstances a little bit more in order to advise. We probably won't have time to get into that this evening. So just to give you an idea of the requirements, depending on what category you might fall in. So if you are a spouse of an Irish citizen, you don't have to apply for a visa or pre-clearance in advance of coming to Ireland if you are a US passport holder. You will, however, have to provide proof of your relationship. You will also have to provide proof of finances, and the threshold for that currently is €40,000 over a 3-year period pre-tax. And you'll have to register for residency permission after arrival. In the case of someone who's the de facto partner of an Irish citizen, you will have to apply for something called pre-clearance in advance, and I'll go into that in a minute. And you'll also have to provide evidence of your relationship, your finances, and register for residency permission. A child dependent of an Irish citizen, so remember we're talking about someone who's under the age of 18 or 18 to 23, who's a financial dependent and is also in full-time education, doesn't have to apply for a visa or pre-clearance in advance if they're a US citizen. But there will need to be proof of the relationship to the Irish citizen provided, proof of finances, and if the child is 16 or over, they will have to register for residence permission after arrival. Now, I just want to draw your attention to something that you might be wondering why I'm not talking about, which is proof of private medical insurance. Now, that is required if you are the de facto partner of an Irish citizen, and you'll be asked to provide that as part of your pre-clearance application. It may, in some circumstances, be requested for a spouse upon registration. It's not always the case, but it might be something that you get asked for. So what we would suggest is have a look at the website hia.ie, which offers a useful comparison of private medical insurance in Ireland. Now, private medical insurance in Ireland is significantly less expensive than it would be in the United States. To give you an idea, a starting policy would probably be about in the region of €150 a month. So that might just give you an idea there. So starting with de facto pre-clearance. So this happens in advance or prior to traveling to Ireland. If you're in a relationship with an Irish citizen, you've been living together for at least 2 years, you can go through this process. The starting point is irishimmigration.ie and placing an application through the AVATS online visa system. The system will talk you through the application process. It's quite detailed, and you can save and exit the form and return within 30 days to complete, which is quite useful. What you are choosing there is the option pre-clearance join family Irish Nat de facto partner. Tricky, I know, but that's the option that you're selecting. In terms of supporting documentation there, what you're going to need to provide is your passport, an Irish passport size colour photograph, fee, proof of finances, as I said, €40,000 over 3 years pre-tax, which works out just over €13,000 a year. Proof of your relationship or cohabitation for the 2-year period, and as I said before, private health insurance. The application processing time varies. At this moment in time, it's currently taking 3 months for applications once they're submitted to actually be looked at. So we would say budget at least 6 months, but do have a look at the processing times, because that will give you an idea of what might be a realistic date to plan your move over. And certainly until your pre-clearance is approved, you will not be able to travel to Ireland for the purposes of seeking to reside here as the de facto partner of an Irish citizen. If you're approved, your permission will typically be valid for 6 months, so you'll have to travel over to Ireland within that period. And if your application is rejected for whatever reason, you do have 2 months to appeal it. Now, we do have some experience in this area, so if this happens to you, hopefully not, do reach out to us and we'll do our best to provide you with information to help with that. So then, whether you're a de facto partner or a spouse of an Irish citizen, once you arrive in Ireland, what you're doing is you're going through the immigration queue together. If possible, we would suggest that you travel with your Irish citizen partner or spouse. Go to the non-EU queue together. If, however, for whatever reason you can't travel together, make sure you have each other's contact details, because it can be useful to call the person, say your spouse or de facto partner is already in Ireland. You may need to call them when you're at the immigration desk there at Dublin Airport. So make sure you have those contact details. A photo of your spouse's or partner's Irish passport is also very useful, so do have that with you if you're not traveling together. Make sure you have supporting documentation ready to present. So for instance, if you are married to an Irish citizen, have your marriage certificate with you, and state your intention at that point to register for residence as the spouse or partner of an Irish citizen. This is extremely important, because what it does is it makes it clear to the officer that you're dealing with at border control that you're planning on remaining in Ireland and residing here. So they'll generate an entry stamp at this point in your passport, which will let you register under the correct permission. So once you've entered the country, then what happens? Well, after arrival, you'll have to register for residency permission with immigration within 90 days of your arrival or before the date of your entry stamp expires. Depending on when you're going to be residing, the process differs. So if you're going to live in Dublin, you need to make an appointment at the Burgh Key office, and it can take some time to get an appointment. So make sure you don't wait till 2 days before your permission expires, or 2 days before the end of the 90 days. We would suggest you do this as soon as you enter the country. Maybe give yourself a day, but do it as soon as you can, because there may be a waiting period. If, however, you're going to be residing outside of Dublin, what you need to do is register at the local GNIB registration office, and that's usually in the Garda station, and there's a link there for your nearest Garda station. Your Irish spouse or your Irish de facto partner should attend the registration with you. That's very important. And you're going to need to provide supporting documentation. Again, there's a link there that should help with that. And then if successful, typically you'll be granted something called Stamp 4 permission, which will give you permission to reside in Ireland and also to work in Ireland. And you'll get one of these cards, which gets sent in the post after your appointment. So moving on to child dependents then. So this is a child dependent, again, is someone who's under the age of 18, or for immigration purposes in Ireland is 18 to 23 and financially dependent on their parent and in full-time education. We are again talking here about a child dependent of an Irish citizen. So the first thing we'd say again is go back to checking whether your child is eligible for Irish citizenship through their parent. And you'll remember the first slide I went through there. That will help you to figure that out. Foreign birth registration is an option. Once again, the Coalition have a great resource on that. If your child does end up with dual citizenship, so they have a US passport and an Irish passport, it would be advisable for them to travel to Ireland on their Irish passport. And there's a whole process as to how to apply for the Irish passport there. If, however, they're not eligible for Irish citizenship and they're not a citizen of an EU or EEA country, Switzerland or the United Kingdom, it would be advisable to inform immigration of their presence in Ireland. So they don't have to register here for immigration permission, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, until they're 16. But we do suggest that you inform immigration of their presence in Ireland. At 16, then, when they do register, they'll be getting something called a Stamp 3 initially. And then if they're over 18, they can apply for a Stamp 4, which is permission to live and work here. Now, it may be that they've accrued enough residence in Ireland at that point to apply for Irish citizenship via naturalization. So that could also be an option. And again, this is an area that we work in. So if you get to that point, feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to signpost you. So that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Richard.
Great.
Who might need to share a screen.
Yep, I will do that. Sorry. Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, good evening, folks. Hope you're all doing well. So let me just share my screen and I will begin this presentation. So what I am going to do is go through some of the routes for US citizens who have no Irish citizen family member. So this is basically coming to Ireland with no other connection, so under your own steam. And there's lots of different routes. And what I'm going to do is just talk through the main ones. I'm not going to get into granular detail about all of the things, but I want to touch on the key areas that you need to be aware of. And some of them are individual routes, and some of them are routes that might allow you to bring family members as well. So this kind of, it's a broad scope, and I want to just give everyone an idea of what might be possible, and then you can investigate a little bit further for your own situation. So the slides will be shared, as was mentioned earlier, and all these links that we've put up, they are the direct links to exactly where you need to go, because obviously you do your searches for any of this type of stuff, and there's loads of information and loads of websites. So what we've done is we've, through the slides and the headings here, picked the exact sites that you need to be looking at. So that'll save you a little bit of time and a little bit of trouble. So the first one, look, the easy routes, short-term routes, there are a few of them. Tourism, I don't really need to say much more than that. It's up to a maximum of 90 days, not really any longer. There's two other routes that do let you come to Ireland for a bit longer. The first one is the Working Holiday Authorization. The Irish Embassy in the US site is this link here. And it's a great option if you're eligible for it, and it gives you a chance to come over and work here for a year. But it is short term. It does not have pathways to other things. It's hard to move on from that afterwards, and it doesn't allow you to bring any family members. There's also the study route. So study is, as it says, it's to come over. There's short-term study routes, which will be things like English language courses, but longer-term study routes like degrees, masters, PhDs, they're a fairly significant component of the people coming into Ireland every year. Fees are one of the major components. Of course, you have to find your course, you have to pay the fee, and they can be quite expensive. But what it does let you do is it lets you come to the country, it lets you stay, it lets you work part-time during term time, full-time and holidays. And then if it's a degree or a higher level course, after you graduate, you can actually get a graduate visa that lets you stay in the country for up to a year and then apply for work permits. So it's a good pathway, but it's a sort of pathway that you really have to be planning and wanting to do it. It's not something you just do to say, get into the country. You need to want to do the course, complete it, graduate, and get the full benefit of it. So if you follow that link, if anyone's interested, that'll give you loads and loads more detail. And there's lists of all the eligible courses and colleges and universities and so on. So the next option is to come to work. I'm going to skip over that for a second because I'm going into it in more detail on the next slide. And the same for retirement. Both of these we'll be looking at maybe as longer term options, or certainly with longer term potential to bring family also. And then the very last one, which is to join an EU or an EA or Swiss or UK family member. I'm not going to talk about this specifically. This is a whole other area, but it's just to put it out there that if you have a spouse or a partner or someone else that you're very closely linked with who is from the EU or the UK, there is a route for them to come to Ireland themselves, but also to bring family members as well. So it's a totally legitimate route. It's quite well developed, and there's a lot of information about it. So something to consider if you want. So if we're coming to look at work permits, now this is really important, and this is one of the key things that I want to stress. There is a work permit system in Ireland, but it is not permission to work in the broadest sense. It is a permit to work in a specific job. So how this will have to work is you have to find a job first, you have to apply for it, you have to be interviewed, you have to be offered the position. And if that is the case, then you or your employer can apply for an employment permit. That employment permit will give you permission to come to Ireland, to register, to work in that job. So it is linked to a specific job. Once you're here and in it, there is now a little bit more flexibility to move between jobs, but you also have to continue doing some work through the employment permit system. So the employment permits are nothing to do with the Irish immigration system. They are processed by our Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. We're very good at updating processing times and dates. And if you follow this link that we have on the screen there, it gives you all the different types of permits, all the processing times, and what you can kind of expect. But it's something you need to do before you come to Ireland. You can't really come over, as a tourist or on some other type of permission and apply for an employment permit. This is something you need to be planning in advance. So talking about this, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, but this is also very important, is there are basically two types of permits. There are critical skills permits and there's general permits. Critical skills are based on identified labor market shortages. So the Department of Enterprise has made this route simpler and easier and more straightforward, but there are restrictions. So there is a key list of jobs that fit into critical skills. It's quite varied. Off the top of my head, things like a doctor, dentist, IT professional, finance professional. These are the types of jobs that fit into this list. So if you're applying for a job in Ireland, you need to make sure that it is one of those eligible positions. If the job has a salary of over 38,000 in critical skills and it's on that list, then it's a relatively straightforward process. Any job that pays over 64,000 euros, unless it's ineligible, is also eligible for critical skills. Generally, there's a 2-year contract, and the person must have the right qualifications and the right experience. The really great thing about critical skills is you can bring family with you immediately. So if the main person, the sponsor, is going to Ireland on a critical skills permit, they can bring their family with them straight away. Outside of that, you have this general employment permit, and this does get a little bit complex as well, because the general employment permit doesn't specify the types of jobs. You have to sort of work backwards from what's called the ineligible list. The ineligible list is jobs that you just cannot get any type of permit for. And that's actually a really useful piece of information to have, because a lot of jobs fit into that list. And if it's the sort of thing you're looking at, in a strange way, it's better to go to the ineligible list first and find out what you cannot do, and then see what you can do. So if a job is on the ineligible list, just strike it. It's not, you can't apply for any type of permit. If it's on the critical skills, great. It's a relatively straightforward and easier process. And then outside of that, there's lots of other types of jobs, and these might fit for a general employment permit, but they have more restrictions for the employer. In our experience, big firms will have no problems applying for employment permits, but small firms that don't have the experience might be a little bit wary. And that's something no one can really fix. You can't make someone apply for a permit for you, but if you are the person they want for the job, then they will do it. There's one little caveat as well, though, with the general employment permit, is that you have to wait a year before your family can come over. So may or may not be a deal breaker for some people. Moving on out of employment permits, and we're looking at retiring in Ireland. So there is a route to retire in Ireland. You have to be financially independent. So the general rule is an individual income of at least 50,000 euro per year per person, and a lump sum for major expenses. Comprehensive private medical insurance is required. Comprehensive means a bit more than the basic, and I think you might be looking at somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 euro a year for that comprehensive medical insurance. A really important point for this as well is you have to apply in advance. You cannot come over and go, well, I quite like it here. Maybe I'd like to retire here, and I'll make the application. It has to be done from outside Ireland, and it's through a form of pre-clearance. So what we've put on the slide here is there's a link to the actual form that you have to send in, but then a bit more of a general one on the application process and the eligibility. And just one thing to point out, because I think this does come up quite often in our queries. The expectation is, if you go through this route, that you will be resident in Ireland for about 9 months a year. And one of the questions we quite often get is, oh, I might like to spend 6 months in Ireland, 6 months in another country. Ireland doesn't really have that option. If you are not Irish or not an EU citizen, you have to go through the immigration process. And that is basically split into, you're here as a visitor, so about 3 months a year, or you're here as a resident, which is usually about 9+ months a year. And just to throw that out there, that it may or may not be a suitable route for people. And sometimes when we talk to people about this, they kind of decide, well, maybe 6 months is a bit much. Maybe I can bring it down to 3 months and plan the rest of the year accordingly. But it's a good route, and lots of people do use it. But just to be aware that it is very much based on being self-sufficient and having those finances year in, year out, not just the first time, but every year when you need to renew it as well. So what we've done at the end here is we've just put down some of the different scenarios that both me and Sarah have been talking about and the key action that you need to be considering. So when we look at the first one with the de facto partner, you need to do this before you come to Ireland. That is the key message. Spouse of an Irish citizen, you just need to be on top of it and to prepare your documents. If there's a child coming over, either try and get an Irish passport if it's a possibility, or travel together. If you're studying, you need to get your college course in advance. If you're looking for the working holiday, talk to your friendly Irish embassy or consulate. If you're looking to come over to work as a non-EU citizen, you have to get your job and apply for a work permit before you even think of booking a flight. And then if you're looking at retiring here, there is this Stamp Zero application, and that also is a form of pre-clearance. So that's really important. That's the single messages as best as we can do it. Obviously, there's lots more work in each of those areas, but these are good headliners if any of these fit your situation. Now, I think we are hitting the end of it. We've got some useful links for you. Obviously, we have our diaspora support website. IrishImmigration.ie is the official Irish immigration website. It's pretty good. It's got pathways and routes that you can kind of explore a little bit yourself. We have Ireland.ie, we have the Department of Enterprise, of course, citizens information moving to Ireland. This is an amazing resource through the Citizens Information website that has huge quantities of information of all the things that you need to consider. And lastly, we've just put up a link to the Immigration Solicitors in Ireland. This is a grouping of solicitors who are experienced in immigration matters, and we would often refer people to these solicitors if they're looking to get support to come over to Ireland. So for non-EU citizens moving over to Ireland, you might want to engage a lawyer that will help you in the process. And all the firms that are linked on that page are legitimate firms and also with very practical experience. So we don't tend to make recommendations for solicitors, but we know that all the people working through that grouping are the type of people you can go to. Here's all the contact details should you need them for the Irish Diaspora Support Project. Got the email, phone, the office, and all the socials. Find us online. Follow this how you like. And I believe we are on to Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Richard and Sarah. That was a lot of information in a very short period of time. And I know the questions are rolling in. So I am going to kick it off with the first question. Or I should say with the first question that Aileen and I kind of in the background decided to start with, which is over here in the States, we see a lot of advertising promising citizenship through great-grandparents. Would either one of you or both of you be able to address that person who is kind of really hoping that they can get their citizenship through their great-grandparent?
Yeah, and I really wish I had this link to hand, because the Department of Foreign Affairs has a beautiful little tabulated link to explain the rules behind citizenship by descent. And it is based on fundamentally a person who was born in Ireland. Why did I not prepare this link? I really should have, just so I could call it up. But if I...
We'll
in the
find
slides, there is a link to the citizens' information that have distilled that information, and there's a table there. So it is in the slides.
Well, I might just pull that one up then as well. So look, the main thing is it's very, very clear what the official position is. There is either a direct entitlement to it, or you go through the foreign birth registration process. One thing I think that we should put out there is that there is some official information about citizenship by affinity. And this is a question we get a lot. The citizenship by affinity is like a ministerial discretion to grant Irish citizenship. But about the only times that we ever see that used will be in the case of something like adoption. So it's not based on maybe ancestors going very far back. It may not be based on how you feel about it or how much you might like to get Irish citizenship. Just to be blunt about it, it's very strict, very limited, and something to be aware of. It's not really worth pursuing unless you you fit into the other categories of people as well. So do we think we want to put up that link about the farm birth registration and the entitlement? Do we need to go into it in detail, or is it something we can share around after?
I can
I think we
actually
can
just
have it-
share it quickly
Yeah,
if you like.
great.
This
Yeah.
just to say, so this is the page, Citizens Information website. I mean, this one, Diaspora Support, should be your two go-to websites,
Yeah.
really. But this page here, Citizenship Through Birth or Descent, goes through in a very detailed way what I did as well around entitlement. And then this table down here helps work out whether you're entitled to or not. And you'll see it goes all the way to great-grandchild here. And yeah, you can work through that yourselves.
Yeah, you can work through it.
Yeah, this distills the information that's on the immigration website, but it's up to date, and this site is really well curated. So have a look there before you go to the more complicated one.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a little bit of work, and it can be a little disappointing for some people because they might have had an entitlement, but it could have required that one of their parents or grandparents to have registered with the Farm Birth Register. And if that hasn't happened, it's just very sad and unfortunate. But if it has happened, there could be a good route and a good option.
Great. Thank you. Aileen?
Just an easy, we got a couple questions about, yes, the slides will be shared. And when you get them, the links will be clickable. They're not clickable now because they're sharing their screen, but you'll have the recording, you'll have the slides, the embedded links, you'll get it all. We know there was a lot of information, so that was a quick and easy answer. Here's a question. We have an Irish citizen moving home after being in the US for a prolonged period of time, 24 years. Do I need to obtain residency again? Go ahead, Sarah.
I can take that one. So first
Yeah.
of all, congratulations. That's very exciting to be coming back to Ireland after such a long period of time abroad. I suppose it depends what you mean when you say residence. If you're an Irish citizen and you have an Irish passport, then effectively you're traveling to Ireland on your Irish passport. You're arriving at border control and they're saying welcome home. There is no immigration process that you're going through. Okay, so if that's what you mean by residency, then no, there is nothing that you're doing other than traveling on your Irish passport. If, however, you say residency and you have heard of something called the habitual residence condition, then that's an entirely different thing. That is specifically to do with social welfare payments or benefit payments, if you like, in Ireland, and is entirely a different thing. But lucky for you, on diasporasupport.ie, there is an entire page dedicated to the habitual residence condition. So if you think you are going to be returning and, say, applying for a non-contributory Irish pension, definitely look at that page, but also drop us an email if you have more questions.
Great. Can one of you go into a little more detail on the income, the financial proof that you need to have? So I know one person is asking, does it have to be income if they're retired and they're not making any more income? How do they prove that? And another just wants to clarify, is that 40,000 each year for 3 years, or is it 40,000 over 3 years? So if you could just answer both of those.
Sure. Well, the second one first, just to be awkward about it, it's 40,000 euro over 3 years. So probably the easiest way would be to say approximately 13,500 euro per year. So that probably helps a good bit. I mean, I think in the general scheme of immigration systems around the world, it's quite a low financial threshold, and a lot of people will hopefully be able to meet it. Then in regards to retirement, yes, so that is a good question, because you may not be working, but income in the very broadest sense, which is money coming in every year that you have access to. So if it is shares, stocks, it doesn't really matter. Savings that you draw down, if you have €1 million, then you've got 20 years of €50,000 a year. It doesn't really matter. It's just, it needs to be on an ongoing basis. And the point of that is that you don't become a burden on the state. So it's quite simple, a kind of very straightforward immigration route. And they've put this figure on it because that seems to be approximately closest how someone might get by in Ireland. It can be fair or unfair depending on your style of living or otherwise, but they have to put a figure on it, and that needs to be taken into account. There's not much point applying if you can't meet those basic criteria.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Aileen, you're up.
It was a delay on my part. I apologize. Trying to do too many things at once back here. We have someone whose husband's a new Irish citizen through an FBR. He's not changing his residence to Ireland. Once he gets his passport, will I also then have to apply under the 140-day visa? I'm not 100% sure that I understand the question, but we were talking earlier about if your spouse has the Irish passport, right, guys?
Yeah, exactly. There's a few clarifications in that statement. I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but on the basis of if your husband has an Irish passport and has just qualified to be an Irish citizen through FBR and is getting the passport, then ultimately you are the spouse of an Irish citizen, and therefore you're going through that spousal process that I mentioned, which if you are a US citizen yourself, means you're coming to Ireland and at border control, hopefully with your husband, or if they're here, you have the contact details and your marriage set, stating your intention to reside in Ireland as the spouse of an Irish citizen, and then going through the registration process after that point. Now that's if you're planning on living here. If you're not planning on living here, then ultimately you're coming over as a tourist, and so it's potentially the 90-day stamp, but just there's a little bit lack of clarity there, so you might want to email us and actually ask, and then we can check in.
We can do that, yeah. Just to add something actually, and it struck me there, it's not something that we've heard very much of, but many years ago, if you married an Irish citizen, you could get citizenship on that basis anywhere around the world. All those routes and options have been long cut off. So being married to an Irish citizen, I suppose it only becomes of use when you will both be in Ireland. There's not really anything you can do about getting citizenship unless you come to Ireland, apply to live here, and stay here for a period of time. And maybe that's just good to put out there as well, because I know that was such a strong route and way for very many years that maybe some people still have it in the back of our heads as an option, but things have got a little bit tighter and a little bit stricter in the last 15 years.
Thank you. Switching gears a bit, there was a question that came in that I'm just curious about the answer. If as an American citizen, you join your Irish citizen spouse and then the spouse passes away, I guess before you receive your naturalization or have been a resident long enough, do you need to leave the country?
Yeah, that it is certainly a good question, and we have, of course, experienced some of these cases. Not too many, thankfully. I have never seen a case where someone has been required to leave the country. If there was a bereavement, certainly you would have to inform immigration, and you'd have to advise them of the situation. But if someone wanted to stay in Ireland, in my experience, they've always been given that opportunity to live, to kind of change their permission to something that's independent, and that will be, I suppose, sort of like a compassionate response, and it has happened on the number of occasions that we've dealt with it.
Thank you.
We have someone that has had a stamp 4 residence since 2019 under an immigrant investor program. The interesting question here, I think, for the larger group is they go to Ireland frequently, they have a home there, but they're not living there. Have I had any reckonable residence, or does that only start when I move there full time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the citizenship process is probably best viewed as a parallel process to all other immigration. And they have effectively answered their own question very well there. Yeah, you have to be resident in Ireland. In fact, you have to have both the right type of immigration permission. So, for example, a student permission never counts towards citizenship, but a work permit or a spouse permission might. And you have to be in Ireland for the majority of the year. You can be outside of Ireland for up to 72 days. But if you're outside of Ireland for more than that, your permission ceases to be reckonable, which is the phrase they use. So for someone in that situation, coming here on that kind of on-off basis is not much good for applying for citizenship. You'd want to start living here and building up that residence.
Great, thank you. One question was, can you expand a bit on the comment that it's difficult to transition from working holiday visa to employment permit?
Yeah, this is a strange sort of legacy issue. So the working holiday visas and authorizations they're basically bilateral agreements and really managed through our Department of Foreign Affairs. And usually the working holiday authorization or visa states that it is for that purpose only, and you can't transfer to another immigration permission. To me, it seems very outdated because there's lots of people who come over who work and then maybe they find a job and they want to apply for a work permit. But we have seen issues where the response from the Department of Enterprise has been, no, you are on the wrong type of immigration permission. What you should do is leave Ireland, apply from abroad, and then come back in through that work permit route. I don't think it makes loads of sense, to be honest. I think they're missing a potential a good source of employment permit people. But there you have it. It's something you do need to be aware of. That said, the employment permit process can be reasonably quick. So let's put out a scenario. Someone is here on a working holiday. They find a job that might be eligible for a work permit. They interview, they get accepted. Maybe they just need to head back home for about 6 or 8 weeks, do the permit application, and then get a process while they're outside of the country. So there are ways around it, but it's a little bit convoluted and not as easy as it could be, in my opinion.
We have a critical skills question. It says critical skills is a 2-year contract. A little clarification on that. Does that mean the job has to offer you a 2-year contract, or does that mean the visa for the critical skill permit allows 2 years before you need to be renewed? Piggyback on that. What if you get there, you got your critical skills job and you don't like it, you get a different job?
Yeah. Okay, so one of the best ways to view permits and work permits and then the immigration permission you get is to look at it kind of sequentially. So the permit always comes first, regardless. It comes first in the application process, but it also means when you're applying for the critical skills, in order for that critical skills permit application to be successful, you should be offered a 2-year contract. So right from the beginning, everyone should be on the same page. This is a 2-year contract. Your employer wants to give it to you. You want to do it. You present to the Department of Enterprise. They give you the permit on that basis, and then you get the permission to come over. So yeah, jobs change, things happen. Once you're here and you have a permit and something comes up, there are routes out of it. It's kind of complicated to explain it, and maybe I can't go into detail, but there are opportunities to shift jobs, although you would need to go through the permit process again. Or if you're made redundant, there's a special system in place to give people the opportunity to get a permission to allow them to apply for another work permit, and also with some simpler, reduced criteria. So yeah, there are ways to do it. I do think that the best approach, and this is maybe just something that I think is good in general, is to look at that permit as as a 2-year plan. Because the really great thing about critical skills is if you build up 2 years in a critical skills job, after 21 months, you can apply for an independent immigration permission that lets you live and work in Ireland and do whatever you like. So this is not a stay in a job that's terrible or exploitative. Obviously, someone has to leave that. But if you're planning to come over and you're going through the critical skills process, think about a job as a 2-year job. It will give you options to expand your whatever you want to do after that 2 years. It lets you bring your family over immediately. So it's good to view that as something in its own right, rather than as a stepping stone. And once I'm in, I'll shift and change. The system is not super malleable in that regard.
Got it. I do have another question. I think we have time for a couple more, but before we do, I just want to say we're seeing a lot of questions in the Q&A that are about taxes and tax implications, Social Security versus pension. And I want to say that, that while I'm sure Sarah and Richard have some personal experience with that, we did a financial considerations seminar and we had tax experts, both from Ireland and the US on the call. Aileen can share maybe in the chat how to register to receive the post-session material from all of our other sessions. And I would prefer to leave the tax questions up to those who are tax experts. And I'm pretty sure Sarah and Richard would agree with that statement. So happy to answer those through the previous posts that we've had. And if you still have questions after that, please reach out to either Aileen or myself and we can get you further answers. But back to a question to either one of you. Could you just give somebody some hopefully good news that, you know, their parents were born in Ireland, they are definitely citizens. Can they just pick up and move to Ireland?
So yes, from an immigration perspective, they have an Irish passport, or they would be entitled to an Irish passport. They should apply for it. But again, you are ultimately moving to a completely different country. I don't know if the person has visited Ireland or anything like that, but there's obviously so much to think about if you are planning on emigrating to another country. But thankfully, the project that I'm with, Diaspora Project, specifically caters to people like yourself. So have a look at diasporasupport.ie, and what that will do is that will walk you through everything really that you need to consider about moving back to Ireland. And that goes from all the way from accommodation all the way through to the sorts of things you need to be thinking about if you're planning on working here, or indeed things like adjusting to living in Ireland if you've never done so.
Sorry, I'm going through the questions. There's a lot of thank yous coming in. So guys, well done on the information. So timeline question, right, which comes up a lot for people. Are there any options if you get a job offer, but they can't wait the period of time, minimum of 3 months, you guys said plan for 6, right, for somebody to sort out a work permit and get that approved and moving forward? Any other options on that, or is it really just the waiting game?
It is pretty much the waiting game. I mean, the options, I suppose, would be baked into the presentation that Sarah did, predicated on having a spouse or other family member. So like if you don't have one of those and you were just going through the permit system, yeah, you're going to have to wait. One thing I didn't mention actually is some of the really big, there's some like obviously big multinational firms. You know, Ireland hosts Facebook or Meta, Google, all these types of places. They're trusted partners with the Department of Enterprise and can usually have a slightly accelerated processing period for work permits. So with some of those big firms, number one, they're totally used to recruiting abroad. They're doing it all the time. They actually will generally, they'll hire in specialist immigration consultants to do that process, and they get to do it quicker. So I did note one of the questions there as well about like lawyers or agencies geared towards helping people get them. There are certainly lots of recruitment agencies. I mean, there's so many of them we couldn't even begin to say who you might go to. There are certainly lawyers as well, and that list of immigration solicitors will be one of them. Now, when you have to distinguish between the job and the immigration permission, and they are two different things. The lawyers will look at the immigration side and won't go near the job as such. And then you might have recruitment agencies or big agencies themselves that will be ready and available to do it. I mean, the HSE, the health service, for example, recruits huge quantities of people from abroad. And you could go to them directly, So a lot of this is just get on your computer and go searching. And you'll probably find both recruitment agencies and big firms who will be very au fait with the whole process and very happy to do it. But if you have to wait, you have to wait. And there's not really anything you can do otherwise, unless for some incredible reason you're able to start remotely. I don't know what that gets into tax and contract law implications, but maybe it's a possibility depending on the particular role you're doing.
Go ahead, Aileen.
I was going to say on that list, we just had a question come in asking about FBR, great grandparents immigrated to the US 1800s. We just did, Sarah mentioned it earlier, in a collaboration with our member center in San Francisco and the Consulate General of Ireland in San Francisco. Literally last night, we did an FBR webinar, and they went through all of that. So what I'm going to do is get your details. Person that just put that in there, it disappeared on my end. I'm sorry. Send them over when the post-session materials for that are ready. And if anybody else wants the FBR information, just shoot me an email. My email is literally everywhere, as is Emily's. Give one of us an email, let us know, and we'll get you the materials, because they went through the whole process last night. And I think there's links and resources in there that you're going to want to look at also, and it'll be more efficient for you. So great question. I'm glad we can provide you with the resource to answer it.
Great. So I think one more question, and then there was a question that I think I can actually address for everybody. But the question that I'm seeing is, if you do come on a retirement path, are you forbidden from earning income, passive income or digital nomad income, or from getting a part-time job? Are there restrictions on that?
Yes, there are, and it's getting into a funny mix of tax and other ones. But the retirement permission is that it is based on the person not being economically engaged in Ireland. So, but look, passive income should be fine. I mean, like people have to prove their income at 50,000 a year. So whatever it comes from, I think will be okay. Working remotely is a slightly different matter, and funny that is where it goes into the tax stuff, of which I know nothing about, but it maybe draws back to my earlier point about Ireland not really having a system for kind of splitting your year. And maybe one of the reasons behind that is tax. So in one sense, if you're looking at being in Ireland for, say, up to about 3 or 4 months, tax doesn't come into it. You're effectively a visitor. If you're looking at being in Ireland for 9+ months, well, then you're a tax resident here. And then you have to negotiate all those things. But you could not, I don't think you could come here with the stamp zero as a retiree and be, say, employed as a normal worker remotely. It doesn't really fit with that scheme. Possibly people do it, but it is designed for retirement as opposed to living here as a digital remote worker, and that is an entirely different thing. And we don't really have a system in place to deal or cope with that. It's not something that I'm aware of as really being a possibility.
Emily, before you answer that last question, let me just also, as Emily highlighted earlier, I did put the request for post-session materials in the general chat. You can grab that link. We also did a session on employment. So I know, so we've got, and we've got one on retirement coming up. So stick with us. We're gonna get all these questions answered in some way, but definitely reach out for those post-session materials. And we'll get them to you, a lot of great resources. And Emily, I'm going to hand back to you for that last question.
So the last question, actually, I'm becoming somewhat an expert on is can a U.S. high school graduate attend college or university in Ireland and pay the same fees as an Irish citizen, or do they pay a higher fee because they are not Irish citizens? The fees for Irish university are based on residency, not on citizenship. So you would need to establish residency in Ireland prior to attending university for a period of, I believe it's 3 years, Sarah and Richard, am I right?
Yeah, 3 of the last 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. However, the good news is that the Irish Diaspora Center and the Coalition of Irish Immigration Centers have a program called IDEA, which is the Irish Diaspora Educational Alliance. Through that program, we have secured 15 scholarships split between the University of Galway and Dublin City University. We are constantly trying to pick up partnerships with other colleges as well, so keep checking back in with us. However, we have a national conference call on March 4th, Aileen.
Correct.
And if you are interested in joining us for that conference call, we have 3 or 4 students who are going to be sharing their experiences in being US-based students who then went on to take 4 years of university in Ireland. Some of them have graduated, some of them are in the middle of their program. One of them has finished university at the undergrad level and is going back for her graduate degree. So we're really excited to be able to offer those programs and to try and get the word out about these scholarships that we have available. Those scholarships do take about 15 to 20% off of the international fee. So that brings it down to the international fee at both schools is roughly 18 to 19,000, not room and board inclusive. And so 15 to 20% off of that for tuition. And then you would have room and board on top of that. Okay.
I placed that registration link in the chat also, Emily, for the 4th for the IDEA webinar.
Fantastic. Thanks. Well, I just want to say a special thank you to Sarah and Richard for joining us so late in the evening. I hope you both get a very good night's sleep tonight, knowing that you have answered the questions of a lot of people. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to partner with you both. And Aileen, as always, thank you for being our partner in this.
Thanks for having us. And guys, definitely, if you've registered, we'll see you next month when we are doing kind of personal anecdote stories of people that moved, building your network. That's on March 26th. We've got 3 more after that on housing and packing up, retiring to Ireland, and then doing a cross-Atlantic split. So all of that is on monthly. We're all over social media. Everyone knows how to reach Emily and I. And we will get the post-session materials. I know people are very anxious to get the post-session materials after these sessions. We do the best we can to get them out as soon as we can. If you've registered, you're getting them automatically. No need to hit that link to request them. If you have friends that want to request them or you missed past sessions, absolutely sign up there. As soon as we get them prepped, we will get them to you. So thanks for your patience in advance.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys. A pleasure as always. And thank you everyone for all the questions. It's yeah, all the best with your journey to Ireland.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you
Great
very
job,
much.
guys. Thanks.
Great.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.